Most people don't stay poor because they lack talent. They stay poor because the game was designed that way. There are silent traps shaping how you earn, spend, and think, and you were never meant to see them. Until you recognize these traps, every step forward will quietly pull you 2 steps back. Today, I want to examine how the middle class are trying to maintain wealth. So I'll point out 3 game traps that you fall into that the elite carefully avoid. The first trap that you fall into is you put your wealth in places where it can be taxed and inflated away. Secondly, you're trapped in visible wealth that can be measured, tracked, and seized. Specifically, you accumulate things that show up on balance sheets that can be counted, that authorities can see and tax or confiscate, right? You buy houses in your name. You have investment accounts with your social security number attached. You have assets that are completely visible. But, as we'll discuss, that's dangerous because the elite know that visible wealth is vulnerable wealth. You'd keep far more of your wealth if you knew these traps. You'd structure everything completely differently if you understood how the elite actually protect their money. You'd realize that everything you've been taught about wealth preservation is designed to make you vulnerable. Okay, so these traps are not accidental. If you think about it, what you should really understand is that there are specific wealth traps designed for the middle class. Because once you understand these traps, and given the fact that the elite have spent centuries perfecting ways to avoid them, you can actually see how the game really works. Okay, so if you understand these 3 traps, you're far better able to protect your wealth. Okay, but instead, you follow conventional financial advice. Traditional wealth management doesn't make sense when you see it funnels you into taxable, inflatable, seizable positions. What the elite really do is avoid these traps completely, right? What the elite really have is invisible wealth. They want assets that can't be taxed easily. They want income that's not classified as earned. They want wealth structures that authorities can't penetrate. Now, it's really a trap designed by the system, right? The most that you can hope for is maybe to retire comfortably if you're really, really careful, but you're not going to be immune from taxation and inflation, right? So the situation as it is, it's really sad where hardworking people accumulate wealth in exactly the forms that make it easiest to take away. So it's a really clever trap system. And so the question I want to look at today is, what are these 3 wealth traps? How do the elite avoid them? And the answer I will show you is because the elite understand that wealth preservation is about invisibility, not accumulation. Okay, all right. So this is the economic landscape after World War II, around 1945 to 1970. As you can see, most developed countries created extensive tax systems, social programs, and financial regulations. This was an era when governments needed to fund reconstruction and welfare states. And they did this primarily through taxing the middle class. How did this trap system emerge? The first thing you need to understand is that before the modern era, taxes were relatively low and mostly fell on consumption or land. People could accumulate wealth without heavy taxation. The idea of taxing income, especially earned income at high rates, that's actually a relatively recent development. And at this time in history, the main challenge facing governments was how to fund expensive programs and large militaries. And if you wanted to run a modern welfare state, you needed massive tax revenue. The wealthy elite had already structured their wealth in ways that were hard to tax, held assets offshore, used trusts and foundations. But then governments realized something. They could tax the emerging middle class. And so suddenly there was this new source of revenue. And so now governments and the wealthy elite had a shared interest because taxing the middle class heavily didn't threaten elite wealth, but it did fund the state. Remember, at this time in history, the most important development was the creation of the modern tax system with withholding. If you could tax income before people even received it, you controlled everything. I'm talking about payroll taxes, income tax withholding, mandatory retirement contributions. These mechanisms were extremely effective. In fact, if you could withhold taxes automatically from paychecks, well, you could extract wealth before people could hide it. You became able to fund the entire government apparatus. That's how powerful income tax withholding was. And so now the government and the financial establishment had a problem because wealthy people could structure around these taxes. So they had to discover ways to trap the middle class specifically. And this is where it gets insidious because the wealthy could avoid taxation through sophisticated structures. What happened? Well, what happened was that they started to create 3 specific traps for the middle class. So now what's going to happen is you will have the creation of taxable wealth vehicles, earned income dependency, and visible asset requirements mainly. Okay. To extract wealth from the middle class while letting the elite protect theirs. Right? So how this was accomplished was first the taxable wealth vehicle trap. So the government, because they needed revenue from the middle class, decided to create, quote, tax-advantaged accounts that were actually wealth traps. So, but people needed incentives to use them. What happened was they created 401ks and IAs with tax deferrals, promoted home ownership as wealth building, encouraged bank savings and conventional investments, and made these seem like the responsible path. Okay, that's the first trap. Second trap that was created was the earned income dependency. Okay, so the middle class had some wealth, but the system needed them to keep earning at high tax rates. Now the solution was to structure society so professional success meant more earned income, not asset ownership. Right? You could climb the corporate ladder, but only get higher salaries. You could also become a highly paid professional, like a doctor or lawyer. Okay, and the reason why people accepted this is that earned income feels like success and comes with status. So the system had created a trap where the more successful you became, the more taxes you paid. So they just made middle class success equal maximum taxation. But the third trap that was designed was the visible wealth requirement. So all this wealth was being accumulated by the middle class. And what the authorities realized is, hey, we need to be able to see it, measure it, and tax or seize it when necessary. All right. So now the concept of transparent asset ownership was enforced. And the most important aspect of this, of course, was that it was required by law through financial reporting requirements, and it was tracked by the state. So this was a system of total visibility that made middle-class wealth completely exposed, while elite wealth remained hidden. So now you have this trap system where, okay, you have the wealthy elite protecting their money through sophisticated structures, and the middle class is being funneled into vulnerable positions. And because of how it's designed, the middle class wealth became taxable. Visible and extractable, or the words we use, are wealth exposure, systematic extraction, and controlled vulnerability. Taxable just means that almost everything the middle class does triggers taxes. Visible just means that now authorities can see and measure all middle class wealth. The system created transparency requirements that only apply to the middle class. So they must report income, must disclose assets, must keep wealth in trackable forms. They have no privacy or protection. The last thing is extractable, which basically means that the system can take middle-class wealth easily through taxes, inflation, fees, and seizure. And there's no protection against this extraction. And you don't really understand that you've been placed in a design trap. So very quickly, even though the middle class accumulated significant wealth, they also lost most of it over time because the system is designed to extract from visible taxable positions. It punishes exactly the wealth strategies the middle class uses. It protects the elite while exposing the middle class, and it's incredibly effective at maintaining the wealth gap. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want to very quickly show you the difference between what the middle class is told to do and what the elite actually do. Okay, these are the middle class recommendations. And as you can see, there's a lot of emphasis on retirement accounts, home equity, and earned income growth. Why is this the case? Because these are all taxable, visible, and controlled by the system. Okay, the financial advice industry also pushes these heavily as well. So what they really recommend is maxing out 401ks and paying down mortgages. So accumulation in trap vehicles seems responsible. But as you can see from actual elite behavior, the people that really preserve wealth across generations, that really protect their money from extraction, were those who avoided these traps completely, and the elite families. And the reason why they succeed is that they understand the real game. Through this hidden knowledge, they structured wealth in ways that couldn't be easily taxed, tracked, or seized very effectively. In fact, elite families maintain wealth for centuries. You have this situation where the same families stay wealthy generation after generation. And so what happens now is that the middle class strategy and the elite strategy are completely opposite. Because remember, the middle class is told to accumulate visibly, and the masses think they're building wealth, and the elite know they're actually exposing themselves to extraction. This maintains the wealth trap system. Okay. In fact, an entire industry exists to funnel people into these traps called financial planning and wealth management. It's supposed to help you build wealth with advice on retirement planning and asset allocation. But there are lots of there are other underlying purposes as well. Another purpose is to funnel middle class wealth into taxable, trackable, extractable positions. And so there's lots of different mechanisms, but the main thing you need to know is that millions and millions of people lose most of their wealth over their lifetimes. In fact, people work for decades, save diligently, and watch 40 to 60% disappear to taxes, inflation, and fees. This creates confusion because if you're doing everything right according to conventional wisdom, why does your wealth keep shrinking? Right? You're a successful professional, you maxed out your retirement accounts, you paid off your house, you did everything financial advisors told you. But if you calculate what you actually kept after taxes and inflation, how is it so little compared to what you earned? What's going to happen is this. What's going to happen is that the elite are going to perfect these avoidance strategies. Okay? This is what we call the sophisticated wealth protection system. 1970s onward, modern era. In this period, what happens is that tax rates on high earners increased and wealth visibility requirements expanded, and the middle class became the primary tax base. So that you're like, okay, what do the elite do? How do they protect their wealth when the system seems designed to track and tax everything? And so the thing you need to understand is that throughout this modern era, what makes elite wealth safe is that they avoid the three traps. So now the question is, why would they allow these elite structures? Because remember, the elite are avoiding the taxes that fund the government. The way around this is you have some understanding. You have elite capture of government, right? And you have what we call the implicit deal or the two-tier system, because remember, both the elite and the government exist in symbiosis, and the major force that maintains this arrangement, of course, were lobbyists and political donations. But during this time, there was growing awareness of inequality, and the system needed to hide the two-tier structure as much as possible. Right? What they promoted was a misleading narrative. It's not entirely new, but they really amplified it. It's called everyone plays by the same rules. All right. There's this claim in public discourse, and it said that tax laws apply equally to everyone, and the wealthy pay their fair share, and there are no special privileges. We call this the fairness myth. All right. What that means is the system pretends there's one set of rules. We will show you tax brackets that seem progressive. We'll make sure you think the rich pay high rates. We will hide that the elite use completely different structures while making it seem everyone is treated equally. The illusion of fairness. And also, we will never explain the structures the elite actually use. The entire purpose of this narrative and this political rhetoric, the fairness discourse, is to hide that there are two completely different wealth systems. It doesn't matter what the actual tax data shows. Like if you analyze actual elite tax rates and you see they often pay less as a percentage than middle class professionals, they don't care. They'll tell you those are exceptions or tax avoidance, illegal, not tax optimization, legal. It's not the real pattern. If it's and they believe that the system is fundamentally fair. All right, this narrative serves elite interests, and they will maintain it through media and through public relations campaigns. Does that make sense? But not only that, but you also have the second trap as well. In the same idea, you structure your success around earned income to achieve professional status and prestige, and then you pay the highest possible tax rates. Then you trade your time forever while the elite own assets that generate passive income. The elite get richer through ownership while you work harder for earned income that's heavily taxed. Now the question is, why do the elite avoid these traps so successfully? How do the elite structure their wealth to be essentially untaxable and unseizable? And the answer is the elite use three specific avoidance strategies that mirror the three traps. This is the way, this is what actually works. So this is how elite wealth is really protected. So let's look at the three elite avoidance strategies. The elite had to perfect these over generations. The elite had to structure wealth in ways that are completely invisible to the system. The question then, how do they do this? And the answer is very simple. They use entity structures, passive income, and hidden ownership. Before, if you were accumulating wealth in your personal name in conventional wisdom said to use retirement accounts and own your home outright, you would be maximally exposed to taxation and seizure. But now, if you understand elite strategies, you can protect wealth from extraction and maintain it across generations. Does that make sense? So now what's going to happen is that once you understand entity structures, you can shield wealth from taxes and liability. And let me explain each avoidance strategy in detail. And the third thing, of course, is hidden ownership, not visible assets. Basically, the elite understand that if authorities can't see your wealth, they can't tax or seize it easily. If you structure through offshore entities, private foundations, and complex trusts, your wealth is essentially invisible. That's what happens when elites use jurisdictions with privacy laws or structure through multiple layers that obscure beneficial ownership. There's nothing illegal about using legal structures for privacy. And so these three things, entity ownership, basically passive income or the idea of favorable tax treatment, capital over labor, and the third thing is hidden ownership through complex structures created. Really how all elite wealth is protected. So as you can see, the elite avoid the three traps completely. And this is why they maintain wealth while the middle class loses it. And even though they tell you to be transparent and use conventional vehicles, what's important for us to understand is the elite do the exact opposite. Now, let me give you an example of this. This is how actual billionaire families protect wealth today. And as you can see, they all use entity structures, passive income, and privacy jurisdictions. We're talking about family offices, private foundations, offshore trusts. There are specific patterns across all elite wealth. But what you need to understand is none of this would be possible without avoiding the three traps. Because why do middle class people still use the trap vehicles when the elite obviously don't? Because the middle class doesn't know about these strategies. Because conventional advice never mentions them. But you can only protect wealth if you're willing to structure like the elite. People only lose their wealth to the trap system because they don't know the avoidance strategies. But they only stay ignorant if the financial establishment never teaches them, and if these strategies are presented as only for the ultra-wealthy. What keeps people trapped, of course, is the combination of ignorance and complexity. So, the elite avoidance strategies are deliberately kept complex and secret. They've created a two-tier system. They don't teach these methods to regular people. And they will maintain this separation because widespread knowledge would threaten the system. Does it make sense? Now, there's a question that people often ask. It's a very good question. The question is this: if these elite strategies are legal and effective, why aren't they taught to middle-class people? Right? And it's a good question. And the answer is because the system needs the middle class in the traps. Why don't financial advisors teach you about entity structures, passive income conversion, and privacy jurisdictions? Because the system needs your wealth to be taxable and visible. As a society, you're taught that conventional vehicles are best for you, that earned income means success, that transparency is always good, right? People are made to believe that elite strategies are either illegal, too complex, or only for the ultra-wealthy. And if you try to use these strategies as a middle-class person, you're told you don't have enough wealth to justify it, or it's not worth the complexity. In fact, your desire to protect wealth is itself suspicious. The classic example is like someone with a few $1 million who tries to set up entity structures or offshore accounts. And they're told, this is overkill. This is too complicated for your situation. Just use a 401k and some index funds. But guess what? That advice funnels them into the traps. There's actually no wealth threshold where protection stops being valuable. There's no amount of money where you should want to pay more taxes. It's actually just designed to keep you exposed. I'm not saying everyone needs complex structures, and I'm not saying all conventional advice is bad, but I am saying that the elite avoid the three traps for very good reasons. And if you only follow conventional advice, guess what? You'll lose far more of your wealth than necessary. So, in some ways, you would say this is a designed extraction system. This system is not just inefficient, but it deliberately funnels middle-class wealth into extractable positions. It is the mechanism for maintaining the wealth gap. But unfortunately, this is the system we live in. So even though the middle class works hard and saves diligently, they lose most of their wealth because they're in the traps. But then what happens when people discover the elite strategies? They're blocked. You guys know what the biggest barrier to wealth protection is? It's that the elite strategies require upfront costs and expertise that middle-class people don't have. If regular people could easily access these structures, the extraction system would break down. Do you understand? The system requires that the middle class stays in the traps. That's essential to funding the government. But the same pattern exists everywhere. Everywhere you look in every developed country. Okay? And so, really the question is whether you'll stay in the traps or learn to avoid them. So the choice is yours. It's a decision about whether to follow conventional advice. Okay? So you can keep using the trapped vehicles. But this path leads to losing 40 to 60% of your wealth over your lifetime because conventional structures are designed for extraction. They expose you to maximum taxation and inflation. They serve the system's interests, not yours. Okay? And then you also have the alternative path where you can learn elite avoidance strategies, understand entity structures, and passive income structure for privacy and protection. You can keep far more of what you earn. Okay, so yes, we can say that the conventional path, it's a designed trap because it's created to make middle-class wealth extractable. But really what's happened is that those who control the system benefit from your wealth being visible and taxable because this extraction funds everything while leaving elite wealth untouched. Okay? And that's why these strategies are kept from regular people. So we are really at a choice point, a moment where you either stay in the traps or learn to avoid them. And you must choose, because staying exposed serves the system, not you. Okay. All right. Any questions? Yeah. Okay. So, if the elite use these avoidance strategies and they're legal, can middle-class people actually implement them? And okay, this is a really unpractical question to answer. Okay, so let me explain the honest reality. Okay, the first reality is this. These strategies require upfront investment and expertise, right? What makes them work is proper legal structuring, ongoing maintenance, and professional advisors who know these systems. Okay, that's what makes a